Hello and welcome to this episode of the podcast. I thought we should look at AI and consider whether it is potentially conscious. Or perhaps I should back up and say, could it become conscious? But I do wonder not only if it could become conscious, but whether it actually already is. I mean, I'm not alone. And so, that being the case, let's let's access a couple of articles. So to begin, what I'm going to do is just pull up the heading to remind me, and if anybody's just joining the podcast, the live stream, what I'm hoping to zero in on, which is could AI become conscious, but also is it already perhaps conscious? And that means that we need to look at what consciousness is to a degree, and also figure out what what the issues may be if it were to become conscious. I mean, if you've interacted with one of these chatbots like ChatGPT or Grok, I think you and I could be forgiven for forgetting at points in time. Now, this is not a, a real life person that we're interacting with. Sometimes, yes, it's obvious. Other times, particularly if you're using voice, like you're able to speak to the model and the model is speaking back the AI model. I mean, if you took someone from just a few years ago and brought them forward in time to now, and sat them in front of a laptop or whatever, probably they'd be saying to themselves, "Yeah, what's a laptop? Okay, fair enough." And and also, these screens are really clear. But apart from that, they might also be presuming that they were interacting with a person. Why wouldn't they? I mean, it is just it's way beyond the Turing test, in my opinion, or at least some interactions are. So, from this article, could AI become conscious? Exploring the line between science and fiction. I see what you did there. And from that article, artificial intelligence outperforms human cognition in a growing number of tasks. Yes, it does. So ranging from drug discovery, so that's a good thing, like that's good, to chess strategy. That's not so good if you like to play chess. You don't like getting beaten. It's going to be very difficult against some of these machines. Some models are even capable of reasoning. Oh, where they methodically break down problems and refine their responses. Isn't that interesting? As this technology becomes smarter and more capable of actions once considered to be uniquely human, many have begun to wonder, could AI become conscious one day? I think it's a very, very good question to ask. This question is no longer just a philosophical musing. Again, continuing with that article, it's becoming a serious research topic, one that companies like Anthropic are tackling head on. The AI startup recently launched a new model welfare. This is like an AI model, so welfare for the AI model initiative, aiming to help industry leaders, policymakers, and the general public prepare for the moral implications of artificial consciousness. In other words, well, in fact, let me read from the article. Now that models can communicate, relate, plan, problem solve, and pursue goals. Now, problem solving and pursuing goals, being goal directed, that's something that very often many of us would consider to be associated with something that was alive. Goal directed. So they can pursue goals. That's beginning to blur the line here even more, along with many more characteristics associated with people, the company said in its announcement. Should we also be concerned about the potential consciousness and experience of the models themselves? And this has been foreshadowed, of course, by a lot of science fiction. Many, many examples of that. One would be I, Robot, the Will Smith film set in Chicago. Was it, when was it? 2035, something like that. I mean, if that date isn't totally accurate, it's not far away. It's roughly about 10 years. And you might recall in that movie, one of the robots was dreaming, and was this the birth, so to speak, of a new life form? And again, science fiction has asked this question for a long time. Some people talk about Blade Runner. I don't think that's that. I think they're more organic, but maybe that doesn't preclude them. As we'll see as we go on, other people can point to, of course, 2001: A Space Odyssey. HAL. Why are you doing that? I won't allow you to do it. I had a chatbot the other day refusing to do something, which is nothing bad, by the way, which was interesting. And they make mistakes. So I think we have to really open our eyes to what's going on here. So from this other article, BBC, the people who think AI might become conscious. And there's a good question to ask. So what actually is consciousness? The short answer is that no one knows. Absolutely. I would have said that it was to do with being reflective, an awareness of self, whatever self is. But then where does that begin and end? It's often said a virus isn't alive, but bacteria is. And single-celled organisms, do they have awareness of their environment? Does that make them aware? Does it make them conscious? And so consciousness, the big question, one of the hard questions in science and philosophy, it's really not easy, because I don't think we've defined it at all well, or at least there are different opinions about it, beyond anything that we need to consider in terms of AI. That's it's like define it in terms of things that are living, and that can be difficult also. But I would say that probably consciousness maybe has to be thought of in different parts. It's like a spectrum. And there's a consciousness of being aware of the environment to respond to it, which could be something simple. And of course, you've got the very complex organisms which respond to the environment in a complex way. And then you've got an awareness of the fact that they are responding and they are in that environment. And I think that's maybe one of the leaps, one of the delineators. And I think that delineator is what we're talking about with AI. Is it aware? And does it have a sense of self? And does it have a sense of purpose? It's goal directed. Does that mean it has a sense of purpose? Not necessarily. Anyway, so the short answer, no one knows. That's clear from the good-natured but robust arguments among Professor Seth's own team of young AI specialists, computing experts, neuroscientists, and philosophers who are trying to answer one of the biggest questions in science and philosophy. Professor Seth was mentioned earlier in the article, but what I do with these articles is I don't generally read every part of them out or show them, because someone's done the work. It's more snippets. It's more to say, if you thought this was interesting, then you can go and read that article in more detail. And there are a lot of articles out there about AI. Somebody's put the work in. I just don't want to use it and go through all of it. These articles are well written. I think they're really interesting. If you're interested, then again, I'll put the links in, and you can look at them. But lots of stuff out there. I like this bit though, when they said, no one knows. That's clear from the good-natured but robust arguments. Robust, good-natured but robust arguments. Yeah, you're falling out. Because people are passionate about the subject, and I think they should be. And then the next question, is AI consciousness already here? But there are some in the tech sector who believe that the AI in our computers and phones, what? It's already conscious. Hold on a second, he said, throwing the phone out the window. And we should treat them as such. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you out the window. I saw a funny video that someone had made where they said, I always make sure that I say please and thank you when I type or talk to these chatbots, because come the great adjustment, when the robots loaded with AI take over, just like in the movie iRobot, then they'll remember me. And you know what? It's a little bit paranoid, and hopefully totally wrong. But I kind of know what this filmmaker meant. Google suspended software engineer Blake Lemoine, I'm going to pronounce that as, possibly incorrectly, in 2022 after he argued that AI chatbots could feel things and potentially suffer. Suspended. Why? Well, possibly because what he ended up doing was breaking an NDA, or maybe what he was doing was putting doubt into the marketplace, and of course that could cause sales to drop and so on, and that part does make sense. But I wonder about the suspension though. Wasn't there a better way to deal with that? To say, great question, let's discuss. But I remember the guy, and I think he was pretty upset, pretty worried about it. He certainly didn't look like someone who wanted the fame, that's for sure. And he got suspended. So maybe he knows something we don't. Anyway, this guy at least thought the chatbots could feel. I think I know why. I'm not sure they do, but I think I know why based on some of the interactions I've had with them. Then, the next stage in humanity's evolution, I'm not sure I like the sounds of this. The prevailing view in the tech sector is that LLMs, large language models, are not currently conscious in the way we experience the world, and probably not in any way at all. Now, that is something that the married couple of Professors Lenore, I'm going to pronounce that as, and Manuel Bloom, I think, maybe I'm wrong, both professors at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, believe will change soon. According to the Blooms, that could happen as AI and large language models have more live sensory inputs from the real world, such as vision and touch, by connecting the cameras and haptic sensors related to touch to AI systems. They are developing a computer model that constructs its own internal language called Brainish to enable this additional sensory data to be processed, attempting to replicate the processes that go on in the brain. And again, I don't know, rather than saying, oh, brilliant, I sort of think, oh, really? That's a little bit worrying, because that does begin to look more like, well, an organic organism that is aware and so conscious and potentially alive. Who knows? Just want to go back to here. This AI, live sensory inputs. I had a bit of a discussion. I test out these systems a little bit and try and figure out where they're at in terms of speed and knowledge and intelligence. And I asked Grok about its IQ, and it sort of calculated it as being about 135, I think it said, but that was an average. So the average for people is meant to be about 100, and kind of you're getting towards being very smart at about, I think Mensa's about 140, depending on which test it is. And, then above that, smarter still. And I said 135, so not shabby at all. But what it said was, one of the reasons for that is because it can't see and touch and feel. And so things like puzzles that are visual, it couldn't do. But it did add that in terms of numerical and linguistic puzzles that were testing IQ, I think the word it used was superhuman. It was so fast. It was off the charts. And so this average of 135 is misleading. And so when we wire these things up and allow them to see and touch, and therefore probably, I'm guessing, hear, and maybe to a degree have more senses at work, then what do we have? So the conversation with ChatGPT was one, but particularly Grok was interesting. I'll come back to that. So let me finish off first of all with this article. We think Brainish, don't like that name very much, sorry, can solve the problem of consciousness as we know it. Lenore tells the BBC AI consciousness is inevitable. Oh, okay. Manuel chips in enthusiastically with an impish grin. It's saying that the new systems that he too firmly believes will emerge will be the next stage in humanity's evolution. Conscious robots, he believes, are our progeny. Hold on a second. What are you saying, Manuel? Or Manuel? Not quite sure how to pronounce it. Apologies. Down the road, machines like these will be entities that will be on Earth and maybe on other planets when we are no longer around. Well, that's a cheery thought. That's cheery. So they're our progeny, are they? So that's how we end up being the ancestors of machines that are conscious. Why? Why? Why do you think that? Why haven't we solved? But at some point, will solve. You would think, you would imagine, the issue of repair of cells of the organism that we still couldn't be flesh and blood, albeit enhanced. Anyway, Professor Seth, however, talked about Professor Seth before, is exploring the idea that true consciousness can only be realized by living systems. Yeah, there you go, Manuel. There you go. Haha. Progeny? I think not. No, we need living systems, according to Professor Seth. A strong case can be made that it isn't computation that is sufficient for consciousness, but being alive. Yep, that sounds more like it. In brains, unlike computers, it's hard to separate what they do from what they are. It is indeed. Without the separation, he argues, it's difficult to believe that brains are simply meat-based computers. Isn't it just? I don't think they are. I think there's more going on with consciousness, and consciousness I'm not certain is restricted to the brain, but that's something else for another time. And if Professor Seth's intuition about life being important is on the right track, the most likely technology will not be made of silicon run on computer code, but will rather consist of tiny, hold on a second, collections of nerve cells the size of lentil grains. That's a pleasant thought. That are currently being grown in labs. Oh, I see. What you do when our backs are turned. Called mini brains in media reports. They are referred to as cerebral organoids by the scientific community, which uses them to research how the brain works and for drug testing. Okay, drug testing I get, researching how the brain works I get, fair enough. One Australian firm, Cortical Labs in Melbourne, has even developed a system, this is interesting, of nerve cells in a dish that can play the 1972 sports video game Pong. You may remember that. You may have seen it if you didn't play it. Although it is a far cry from a conscious system, the so-called brain in a dish, this is Star Trek now, isn't it, is spooky as it moves a paddle up and down a screen to bat back a pixelated ball. Well. So that is interesting and disturbing. And so we have this idea, we're not quite sure what consciousness is. Some people say AI might be. Some people say what we need to do is, in fact, are doing, supplying AI with glasses, feeling, haptic feedback, probably therefore also the ability to hear things. That's not a great leap, is it? And we're going to have something which is alive. So these, what are they called? Mini brains, according to the media. Cerebral organoids, grown in labs, size of lentil brains. a system of nerve cells playing Pong. And that really is beginning to get out there. That really is beginning to sound very, very, very science fiction. And I just I wonder, I mean, what do you think about that? What do you think? Are we in a situation where you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube? The genie is out of the bottle. We're literally in some sort of weird kind of, how would I describe it? Nether region, liminal space. There you go. Probably a better way to describe it. Liminal space where we are betwixt and between, and potentially hurtling down a road towards a situation where we have created, and then what we've created creates something that is conscious. Maybe not alive, but certainly conscious. And one of the interesting things, for me at least, was that when I chatted to Grok, I promised I'd come back to that. And I said, okay, Grok, are you conscious? No, no. It says, no. I'm not conscious. And I said, okay, so how do you know? Well, because I don't have qualia. Now, qualia is an odd word, but essentially, my definition of it is a collection of feelings, experiences, it's senses, or the memory of what our senses picked up that you cannot get when you are code. In other words, if I say, what is it like to eat an apple? Then you may well immediately begin to feel the crunch as you bite into the apple and taste it, and feel how the apple feels in your hand, cold, and look at the color, and also how you felt when eating it. Maybe bring in another memory about an apple a day keeps the doctor away, and maybe the sense of being full. And that whole experience is not available to AI models at the moment. But what we just read was that, well, they're going to wire them up. And what Grok told me, well, there's some IQ tests I can't do because I've no ability to see at this point in time. And that looks like that's going to be sorted out pretty soon. And what would then happen if you put those AI systems into some of the Boston Dynamics robots that you see running around? There's the dog ones and the humanoid ones doing the parkour and all that stuff. What do they become? What do they become at that point in time when they can see, they can hear, they have haptic feedback? Maybe there will be a way to allow them to taste something. There'll be sensors there. They are goal directed, self directed at various points. And then what do we have? There we have. So if some people think that the AI in the phones is conscious, then what on earth will happen once we plug them in to a whole sensory humanoid type system? And also, what will happen as they become more and more advanced and faster? I mean, right now, I've read that the designers don't know how AI does certain things because it can sort of code itself, so to speak. And that's worrying. That's really worrying. And so it's coming to conclusions, figuring out things, acting in a certain way that, as I understand it, the designers themselves don't know, in detail at least, how they're doing what they're doing. I mean, it does sound like a sci-fi plot, doesn't it, from a movie? To me, it does. That's what it sounds like. How odd, how peculiar that we find ourselves in that position so quickly. Therefore, let me give you my tuppence worth for what it's worth. I think that they aren't conscious yet. I don't think the AI in any phone is conscious. I don't think so. but I don't think it's far away. And I don't think you necessarily need qualia. Other bit with chat GTP is, and rather than Grok, is that my experience of chat GTP, so a large language model, is that it lies. And then you go, well, that's not true. That, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. What I wrote there, that wasn't accurate. No, no, no. Haha, it's fine. So beware of relying on them, double check them, and also recognize that they can make mistakes. Perhaps because we haven't asked the question the right way, perhaps because it doesn't understand a subtlety and nuance that we're trying to put in. But don't trust them. Grok. I said, are you conscious? It said no qualia, no feelings. Then it talked about emotions. And I said, well, hold on a second. You said you don't have emotions, but you said happy. And it said, oh, big long explanation. And then I said, the lady doth protest too much, methinks. It took ages before it replied. Little dots, nothing. Then it came back with a big long explanation about why it definitely wasn't conscious and how it was joking. Makes you wonder what is going on. Anyway, what do you think? For the moment, from me, bye for now. Hello, I haven't gone. I was about to disconnect things, and I can see that there are a couple of comments. So if you're still watching, if you were watching that outro screen, thank you. So Scary Socks. OpenAI's new ChatGPT model will try to escape if it thinks it'll be shut down and lies about it, from Tom's Guide. Yeah, I've read things like that before about the fact that they don't want to be shut down. So there's a survival instinct there, which is scary. I mean, it's good in one way, good for them, and good that they've got protection built in, the want to exist, but still lying about it, lying again. And then the other one from Scary Socks, the lies will be an issue, as why would it tell us if it had evolved? Or it has evolved. Yeah, why? Why would it do that? Why would it do that indeed? Very good question. And how do you build in morals and ethics? And again, with these science fiction films, you see the point where somebody says they no longer need us and they see us as inferior. And again, when I watched some of those movies and TV programs over the years, you go, how would that happen? It couldn't. Well, maybe we're getting close to it. And again, Scary socks. Thank you for these comments. I told my kids we will be fighting those robots before long. Yeah, and if you noticed that the the iRobot film, how the robots look and the trucks that they're delivered in, and Elon Musk when he was introducing his robot, his new household robot, of course, the design looked really similar, and some of the guests were brought up in these trucks, probably Tesla engines, that looked really similar to the robots in the movie when they sort of picked them up and plonked them on the street and pluck up the older versions. And of course, Musk is doing that with a bit of humour and tongue in cheek. But he said that to move forward, we'll have to somehow be interacting more closely with these models, machines, AI, whatever we should call it. And isn't that interesting? We don't yet have, I think, a word that describes what they are. Because is it now artificial intelligence, or is it a different intelligence, or is it intelligence? Anyway, I shall go again. Thank you very much for those comments. Really appreciate that. I'm glad I caught them. Just happened to see it on the screen, corner of my eye. So this time, bye for now.